The house was unusually quiet that morning. Sunlight streamed softly through the curtains, dust motes dancing in the warm glow, but the stillness felt heavier than usual. Michael had left early, for work, as he often did, and the usual bustle of children and staff was absent. For the first time in weeks, I noticed the silence and it unnerved me. I wandered into the kitchen, pouring myself a cup of coffee, feeling the subtle ache of loneliness that had been growing beneath the surface. It wasn't just the quiet, though that certainly played a part. It was the emptiness in the days, the repetition of routine, and the way Michael seemed so absorbed in his own life that I often felt invisible in my own home. As I sipped the coffee, I caught a glimpse of the driveway from the window. A new car pulled up, sleek and shiny, and my heart skipped a beat, not from excitement, but from curiosity. A man stepped out, carrying a crisp uniform bag. He moved with an ease and confidence that seemed effortless, his posture perfect, his expression calm. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, his voice polite, warm, and strangely disarming. I blinked, surprised by the sudden flutter in my chest. He was handsome, no doubt, but there was something in the way he carried himself, a subtle awareness, a quiet charm that seemed to notice everything without intruding. "I'm your new driver," he added, handing me a small card with his name on it. "I'll be taking care of your transportation needs." I smiled, more than a little distracted. "Thank you. I'm glad to meet you." My words sounded ordinary, but inside, my mind was already wondering. Something about him made me feel seen, noticed, even in my own home. He moved inside to familiarize himself with the house, his steps measured, respectful, yet there was a subtle energy to his presence. He asked questions about schedules, routines, and small preferences, all in that calm, professional tone. But I found myself noticing everything: the way his hand lingered just a moment too long on the counter as he set down a cup, the casual tilt of his head when he listened, the quiet confidence in his movements. A part of me chastised myself immediately. He's just a driver. This is absurd. You're imagining things. Yet the flutter in my chest refused to go away. There was an excitement here. A thrill in the forbidden idea that someone could see me, really notice me, in a way I hadn't felt in years. I busied myself with breakfast preparations, trying to focus on mundane tasks. But I couldn't stop stealing glances at him. Every polite smile, every courteous gesture sent a small spark of something I couldn't name straight to my chest. My mind began weaving scenarios, small fantasies where our interactions weren't just professional, where he noticed the subtle cues I wasn't yet giving. When he asked if I needed him to adjust anything in the schedule, I found my voice softer than usual, my tone carrying a warmth I hadn't intended. "No, I think this is perfect, thank you," I said, my heart racing slightly. He nodded, his eyes holding mine for a brief moment, a flicker of curiosity passing through them. That moment passed, and I chided myself internally. Focus. He's just doing his job. You shouldn't. But deep inside, I knew the tension was already building. Something had shifted. The quiet house, my restless heart, and this unexpectedly magnetic presence had collided in a way that promised excitement and perhaps danger. As he finished his morning preparations and headed out to start his duties, I watched him from the doorway. There was a subtle sway in his step, a confident grace, and a charm that lingered long after he left the room. I leaned against the doorframe, heart pounding, whispering softly to myself, This is going to be complicated." The day stretched ahead, ordinary on the surface, but charged underneath. I knew, even in this first encounter, that something had begun a dangerous, thrilling attraction I couldn't ignore. And as I moved through my morning, performing tasks with an air of calm composure, I felt it, the quiet, innocent tension of a storm yet to come. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow across the living room as I went about my tasks, tidying up and rearranging a few decorative items. Every now and then, I found myself glancing toward the driveway, almost unconsciously anticipating the driver's return. It was strange, the way a simple presence could awaken feelings I hadn't acknowledged in years. He arrived promptly, stepping out of the car with the same quiet confidence he had displayed in the morning. His uniform was neat, his posture perfect, and yet there was an ease about him that made him approachable. As he approached the front door, our eyes met for a fraction longer than necessary. My heart gave a subtle leap of fluttering sensation I couldn't ignore. Afternoon, ma'am, he said with a polite nod, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. There was nothing overt in his expression, yet the way he looked at me felt layered, as if he noticed nuances most people. I returned his greeting, trying to maintain calm composure. Good afternoon. I hope everything's going smoothly today, I asked, my voice carrying an intentional warmth, a subtle note of interest I couldn't fully conceal. He nodded. Yes, everything is on schedule. Your appointments are set, and I've double-checked the route for the evening. His words were professional, but there was a deliberate pause before he spoke, a subtle acknowledgement that seemed meant only for me. I busied myself with organizing a few papers on the side table, but I caught his gaze lingering on me just a moment too long. A slight tension danced between us, an unspoken connection that made the air feel warmer, heavier, charged. I told myself to dismiss it, to focus on reality, yet the magnetic pull was undeniable. As he walked past me toward the car to retrieve something, his hand brushed lightly against mine. Accidental, or so he claimed. The touch was brief, almost imperceptible, yet it sent a shiver up my spine. My pulse quickened, and I fought the urge to look at him again to see if he had noticed the effect. Everything all right, ma'am? He asked, as if reading my momentary hesitation. His voice was steady, confident, but with a softness that hinted at awareness. I smiled politely, trying to mask the internal rush of excitement. Yes, just caught off guard, I suppose, I murmured, my tone carefully measured. The day continued with routine tasks, but I found my mind wandering. Each movement, each glance, each subtle smile from him lingered longer than it should. The ordinary act of supervising a schedule had transformed into a series of private moments laden with tension. I couldn't help imagining scenarios where the professional barrier blurred, where stolen glances evolved into daring conversation. I told myself repeatedly, this is only attraction, nothing more. Keep control. Yet control felt distant, elusive. There was an undeniable thrill in the stolen glance, in the way he seemed to notice the subtle cues I wasn't even aware I was giving. The air between us hummed quietly, invisibly, like electricity waiting to spark. Later, as he returned the car keys and prepared to leave for his next task, our eyes met once again. This time, the glance lingered a fraction longer, an unspoken acknowledgement of shared awareness. My lips curved into a small, knowing smile, and I sensed he noticed it too. A silent game had begun, subtle yet loaded with promise, a delicate dance of awareness and restraint. As the door closed behind him, I leaned against the wall, heart still racing, whispering softly to myself, This is only the beginning. I knew the tension would build, that the flirtation was only starting to ripple through the quiet, ordered life I had once known. And somewhere deep inside, I felt a thrill and anticipation of what was to come. A secret warmth that was mine alone to savor. The house remained calm, but I sensed it was a calm filled with potential energy. A charged silence that heralded the storm of temptation yet to come. The first glance had passed, but the game had begun, and I was ready to play. The afternoon stretched lazily, the sunlight filtering through the blinds, painting stripes across the living room floor. I moved around the house with a careful, deliberate grace, Every small action an opportunity to notice him and for him, unknowingly, to notice me. When the driver returned from running errands, I greeted him with a smile that I felt lingered just a little longer than necessary. He inclined his head politely, his eyes briefly meeting mine. The tension in that simple exchange made my heart race. A subtle game was beginning, delicate, almost invisible, yet charged with anticipation. As he placed the shopping bags down, I walked past him, allowing the tip of my fingers to brush against his arm. The touch was casual lore, at least that. As how I intended it, but the warmth of his skin and the slight pause in his movement told me he felt it too. My pulse quickened at the reaction, a silent thrill coursing through me. "Everything in order?" I asked, my voice soft, teasing, just enough to carry a hint of playful curiosity. He nodded, eyes briefly flicking to mine, a small, almost imperceptible smile forming. He said nothing, but the exchange said more than words ever could. I found excuses to linger in the same room as him, organizing, adjusting, cleaning whatever tasks I could use to create opportunities for proximity. Every glance, every small smile, every casual touch became a subtle communication. The thrill of secrecy made each encounter feel heightened, intense. As we passed each other in the hallway, I deliberately let my hand brush against his again, this time more consciously. His reaction was minimal, professional, yet his quickened glance betrayed a flicker of awareness. I felt a shiver of excitement, knowing that the tension was mutual, yet carefully contained. Later, in the kitchen, I poured him a cup of coffee just in case he needed it, watching as he accepted it. My eyes met his over the rim of the cup, and I allowed my gaze to linger, holding his attention for a heartbeat longer than necessary. A faint, knowing smile tugged at my lips. He set the cup down with quiet grace, his professionalism intact, but the subtle tension in the air was undeniable. A dance had begun, one of silent gestures, playful glances, and unspoken understanding. Every small action I took, every teasing smile, was calculated to test boundaries, to feel the thrill of control, to savor the attraction that simmered between us. I found myself laughing a little more openly at his polite jokes, allowing the warmth in my expression to extend beyond mere courtesy. Every laugh, every tilt of my head, every playful word was a thread weaving a web of anticipation, binding him and me in silent, tantalizing communication. By the time he returned to his duties outside, I leaned against the counter, a quiet smile on my lips, heart still racing. The day had passed with ordinary tasks, yet every moment had been charged with subtle energy, anticipation, and the thrill of a secret game. I whispered softly to myself, a confession I didn't intend anyone to hear. This is only the beginning, and I can feel it already. He notices me. The quiet house held its breath, charged with the silent promise of the days to come, the hidden tension of forbidden flirtation, and the delicious thrill of desire yet to be fully explored. That evening, the house settled into a gentle quiet, the kind that makes every creak of a floorboard sound amplified. I wandered into the study, ostensibly to organize some papers, but in truth, I was seeking a moment to myself, a chance to reflect, to acknowledge the whirlwind of thoughts that had been simmering all day. My mind kept returning to him, the driver. Every glance, every subtle touch, every fleeting smile from earlier seemed to replay in my thoughts, like a private movie only I was allowed to see. I chastised myself quietly at first. It's impossible, inappropriate, foolish, but the feelings were real, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. I poured myself a cup of tea, cradling the warm mug in my hands as my mind wandered. I remembered the brush of his fingers against mine, the fleeting eye contact that lingered just a little too long, the way he seemed to notice small details about me that others overlooked. There was something magnetic in his presence, a subtle pull I couldn't resist. A part of me, the part that had been buried under years of routine and marital comfort, felt alive for the first time in years. The excitement was intoxicating, the thrill of being seen, and desired awakening emotions I thought I had forgotten. I imagined scenarios innocent, playful, teasing moments that could stretch into private encounters. My pulse quickened at the thought, a flush warming my cheeks. Yet, another part of me, the rational, controlled part urged caution. He's just the driver. You are married. This is dangerous. I repeated it in my mind like a mantra, but each repetition was met with a quiet rebellion of desire. I knew the boundary was being tested, and I felt a thrill at the thought of how far I might go. I pictured the subtle ways I could interact with him without drawing attention, lingering in the hallway when he passed, exchanging small smiles, a playful tone in conversation, subtle touches disguised as accidents. Each image made my heart race. I realized, with a mixture of excitement and fear, that I was already crafting our secret dance in my mind. I allowed myself a moment of honesty. I want him. I want his attention, his presence, even the forbidden thrill of crossing lines I know I shouldn't. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a delicious tension that was both exhilarating and terrifying. I felt alive in a way I hadn't felt in years, alive and dangerous. At the same time, guilt gnawed quietly at the edges of my desire. I loved Michael, or at least I had once loved him, and I knew the stakes of my actions. But the thrill of being wanted, the intoxicating pull of temptation, was overpowering. It was a dance between desire and conscience. A storm that brewed quietly in the background of the household's calm facade. As night fell and the lights dimmed, I sat alone in the study, letting my thoughts roam freely. I imagined him noticing the smallest cues, an accidental brush of the hand, a soft laugh at one of his jokes, a lingering glance, and I felt a mix of excitement and fear at the consequences if anyone else noticed. In that quiet, private moment, I acknowledged a truth I couldn't deny. The attraction was no longer just a fleeting thought. It had taken root, and with it came anticipation, temptation, and a secret thrill that I would carry into every encounter. My pulse still racing, I whispered softly to myself, "This is just the beginning, and I cannot wait to see how far it can go." The house settled into silence, but inside me, the storm of desire had only just begun, and in that quiet tension, I understood something vital. The next days would be a test of control, temptation, and the dangerous thrill of The next morning, the sunlight filtered through the blinds in golden slats, and with it came a quiet determination I hadn't expected. The previous day's thoughts lingered like a secret melody, replaying every glance, every fleeting touch, every spark of tension that had made my pulse race. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years, and today, I decided I would test the boundaries. When the driver arrived, his presence was as steady and professional as ever, but I could feel the subtle awareness between us, the invisible thread that had begun to connect us. I smiled as I greeted him, letting my eyes linger just slightly longer than usual. A warmth spread through me as I saw his subtle recognition of my gaze, the faint hint of curiosity in his expression. As he carried in the morning mail, I allowed my hand to brush his ever so slightly, deliberately, letting it linger just a heartbeat longer than necessary. He froze, just for a second, and then continued with a polite nod. That tiny pause sent a thrill straight through me. I was testing him and enjoying it. "Thank you," I said softly, letting my tone carry a hint of warmth, of personal attention, without being overt. He nodded, his eyes meeting mine briefly, and I sensed he understood the silent game. The electricity between us was growing, subtle but undeniable. I found excuses to cross his path frequently, walking past him in the hallway, stopping by to hand him a document, lingering in the kitchen as he passed. Every interaction was a delicate dance, a silent challenge, a test of awareness. I reveled in it, each small gesture feeding the thrill of forbidden attraction. When he paused to adjust a stack of papers, I deliberately brushed against him again, this time under the pretense of retrieving something from the table. My fingers lightly grazed his arm, and I caught the faintest pause in his movement. A shiver ran through me at the realization he had noticed. He might not speak of it, but the tension in his posture, the slight lift of his eyebrow, told me everything I needed to know. As I moved through the house, I imagined the possibilities, the subtle touches that could be exchanged without drawing attention. The quiet glances, the playful conversations just under the radar of propriety. Each thought sent a thrill of excitement racing through me. I knew I was playing a dangerous game, yet the danger made the game irresistible. During a brief pause in our routines, I found myself standing close as he handed me a folder. Our fingers brushed lightly, and I allowed my eyes to meet his, holding his gaze for a moment longer than necessary. The tension between us was palpable, unspoken, charged. It was a delicate balance, flirtation without exposure, temptation without immediate consequence. I caught myself smiling softly at the silent exchange, and I could feel a flush of warmth rising in my cheeks. This subtle game, this testing of boundaries, was intoxicating. Each moment was a thrill, each glance a spark, and I knew that with every careful gesture, the connection between us was growing, invisible yet undeniable. By the time he stepped outside to handle the car, I leaned against the doorway, heart still racing, savoring the quiet thrill of control. The morning had passed in ordinary tasks, yet every gesture, every glance, every subtle touch had been a part of a private, thrilling dance, a dance that only we understood. I whispered softly to myself, almost reverently, the thrill of anticipation still coursing through me. This is just the beginning, and I can already feel how dangerous it can be. The house was calm, the world outside unaware, but within its walls, an invisible tension had taken root, promising more temptation, more flirtation, and more of the delicious, forbidden excitement I had come to crave. The sun had dipped lower, painting the room with a soft amber glow that seemed to linger around everything it touched. I moved through the house with deliberate calm, aware of every sound, every shadow, every subtle shift in the air. Today, the tension I had nurtured for days felt almost tangible, like electricity crackling beneath the surface. He returned from his errands with the same quiet efficiency that had become a part of my daily rhythm. Yet each time he entered a room, the energy between us shifted, subtly but undeniably. I caught his gaze lingering just a moment longer than propriety allowed, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Everything all right, ma'am?" he asked, his voice steady, polite. But there was an undercurrent. I could feel a subtle awareness, a hint that he noticed more than he let on. I smiled, deliberately soft and intimate. "Yes, everything is fine," I said, letting my tone carry warmth, a hint of personal attention meant only for him. As he moved to carry a small package into the kitchen, I followed, finding an excuse to be nearby. Our paths crossed, and I let my hand brush his, intentional but casual, the briefest contact lingering just a heartbeat longer than necessary. He froze for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to sense recognition, curiosity, and perhaps a spark of shared amusement. Laughed softly at something he said, letting the sound flow naturally, but deliberately letting it linger, letting it brush against him like a whispered promise. Each word, each gesture, each glance was carefully measured. A silent conversation where neither of us spoke explicitly, yet the meaning was unmistakable. In the quiet of the kitchen, I caught myself noticing details I had never truly paid attention to before. The way his hands moved, the subtle way his eyes flickered with attention, the confident tilt of his head. Every movement, every nuance seemed heightened in my awareness, magnified by the tension I had cultivated. I moved closer under the pretense of reaching for a dish, letting the scent of my perfume mingle subtly in the air between us. Our proximity was intimate, charged, yet carefully controlled. The thrill of near contact made my pulse race. A delicious tension I savored silently. "Would you like some water?" I asked casually, handing him a glass. Our fingers brushed briefly, and I let my eyes meet his. The glance held longer than it needed to. A silent acknowledgement, a quiet promise, a spark neither of us could or wanted to ignore. He nodded, taking the glass with careful hands, and for a moment, the room seemed suspended in time. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of birds outside, the soft glow of the afternoon light, all of it faded into the background, leaving only the charged space. As he left the kitchen to continue his duties, I leaned against the counter, heart still racing, savoring the delicious tension of our encounter. The thrill of testing boundaries, of playing a game where words were few but meaning was infinite, filled me with a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. I whispered to myself, a private confession in the quiet of the house, this is only the beginning. And I can already feel the storm building. The calm of the day belied the undercurrent of desire, the invisible thread connecting us, and the promise of what was to come. Every glance, every touch, every unspoken word had created a delicate, intoxicating web I could neither resist nor escape. And as I moved through the rest of the afternoon, I knew one thing with certainty. The game had only just begun, and the thrill of the forbidden was already consuming me from within. As evening settled over the house, the quiet seemed heavier than ever. The shadows lengthened across the walls, and I found myself alone in the living room, the faint hum of the city outside barely reaching me. Yet despite the calm, my thoughts were anything but peaceful. They circled relentlessly, fixating on him, the driver, and the tension that had been growing. Day by day, moment by moment, I poured myself a cup of tea, cradling it in my hands as though it could anchor my racing mind. I tried to focus on the mundane arranging cushions, straightening books, but every movement seemed to lead me back to him. The memory of our subtle touches, the fleeting glances, the quiet, unspoken awareness we shared, filled me with a mixture of excitement and dread. A part of me, the responsible, controlled part, whispered warnings. This is dangerous. You are married. You cannot act on this. I repeated it like a mantra, hoping repetition would suppress the growing heat inside me. But the voice of reason was fragile against the storm of desire that had begun to consume my thoughts. I remembered the way his eyes lingered on me, the way he responded to my subtle gestures, the almost imperceptible tension that passed between us. Each small interaction had left a mark, a quiet imprint on my senses. I found myself replaying moments, imagining scenarios that were increasingly bold. Imagining his hand grazing mine deliberately, his voice lowering in response to my teasing. Guilt mingled with pleasure, creating a strange, intoxicating cocktail of emotion. I loved Michael Lohr at least. I had loved him once, but the years of routine, of indifference, of busy schedules had left me longing for attention, for excitement, for the thrill of feeling desired. The driver offered all of that, wrapped in a cloak of professionalism that made the temptation even more irresistible. I walked slowly through the hallway, letting my fingers brush along the wall as if tracing the tension that seemed to hang in the air. Each step, each breath, each thought was measured against morality, against loyalty, against the consequences I could foresee. And yet, the pull toward him was undeniable. A magnetic force I could neither resist nor rationalize away. I imagined the quiet moments we could steal, small, intimate interactions that no one else would notice. A hand brushing against mine as I reached for something. A smile lingering longer than propriety demanded. A whispered word carried across a room filled with silence. Each thought sent a shiver through me, a thrill that was both terrifying and exhilarating. And yet, fear lurked just beneath the surface. Fear of discovery, fear of judgment, fear of losing everything I had built in my life. The excitement was a dangerous fire, one that promised warmth and pleasure but threatened to consume me entirely. I felt like a tightrope walker, balanced precariously between desire and consequence, knowing that one misstep could tip the scales. As I sipped my tea, I closed my eyes for a moment and let the tension wash over me. The attraction was real, undeniable, thrilling, and the moral conflict was just as real, a silent, constant whisper reminding me of boundaries, of commitments, of the life I could not fully abandon. In that quiet, private moment, I understood something vital. The days to come would not be simple. The game we had begun, this delicate, intoxicating dance of attraction and restraint, would test every ounce of control I had left. And though part of me longed to surrender, another part knew that surrender came with consequences I could not yet imagine. I whispered softly to myself, a confession I could not share with anyone. I want him, but I must be careful. I want more, but the cost may be higher than I can bear. The house remained still. The shadows deepened, and I sat alone with my thoughts, the storm of desire and guilt swirling within me. I knew the tension was only going to grow, that temptation would become bolder, that the private dance of flirtation and longing had only just begun. And somewhere deep inside, I felt a thrill I could neither deny nor fully embrace, the dangerous, irresistible pull of the forbidden. The next morning felt different, charged in a way that I could almost taste. The sunlight streamed through the windows, golden and soft, casting familiar objects in an almost magical glow. And yet, the ordinary, quiet house now carried a subtle electricity, a tension that existed only between him and me, delicate and unspoken, like a secret whispered across empty rooms. When he returned from running errands, my heart skipped a beat at the sight of him. He moved with effortless grace, his hands steady, his posture confident. Yet there was a gentle awareness in the way he carried himself, as if he sensed more than he let on. Our eyes met for a moment longer than necessary, and I felt the familiar spark of excitement that had been building over days. I found myself lingering nearby, under the guise of completing small tasks, deliberately creating moments where our paths would cross. Each encounter was a subtle indulgence, a way to feel the thrill of proximity, the quiet warmth of shared awareness. I let my gaze rest on him a fraction longer than appropriate, allowing a faint smile to curl at the corners of my lips. "Would you like a cup of tea?" I asked casually, carrying it toward him. Our fingers brushed lightly as I handed it over, deliberate yet subtle. The contact was brief, fleeting, but it left a warm, lingering sensation in both of us, a silent acknowledgement of the tension simmering between us. He accepted the tea with a polite nod, but I caught the faintest flicker in his eyes, a spark of recognition that mirrored my own excitement. It was intoxicating, this unspoken game, this quiet indulgence that neither of us dared to voice. I felt a thrill in knowing that he noticed, even if he pretended otherwise, that he understood the invisible thread connecting us. As the morning unfolded, I found small ways to prolong these moments, standing closer when we spoke, letting my hand linger near his as I passed by, offering quiet compliments on his efficiency and attentiveness. Each gesture was subtle, easily dismissed by any casual observer, yet charged with an intimacy that only we could feel. I reveled in the quiet power of these indulgences, the ability to command his attention, to feel desired without crossing any overt line. The thrill was in the anticipation, in the restrained desire, in the silent acknowledgement of attraction. Each smile, each glance, each deliberate brush of a hand was a small victory, a confirmation that the connection between us was growing stronger, more magnetic. During a brief pause in his duties, I allowed myself a soft laugh at a comment he made, letting my eyes meet his just a moment longer than necessary. The warmth that passed between us was electric yet restrained, a delicious tension that left me both excited and contemplative. I sipped my tea slowly, savoring the quiet indulgence, the private thrill of attention that had nothing to do with the outside world. The day continued with its usual routines, yet nothing felt ordinary. Each small indulgence, the lingering glance, the subtle touch, the quiet smile carried a weight, a significance that made every moment more charged, more intimate. I knew I was treading dangerous ground, yet I could not resist the pull, the intoxicating thrill of the forbidden. As evening approached, I found myself alone for a moment, reflecting on the morning's interactions. The indulgences had been small, careful, subtle, but they had ignited something within me, a quiet fire that refused to be ignored. I whispered softly to myself, "A private confession? This is only the beginning, and I am already caught in the thrill of it." The house was calm, the world outside unaware, but inside, the tension between us had deepened, an invisible thread of desire and anticipation stretching tighter with every passing day. And I knew that in allowing myself these small indulgences, I had stepped further into a game whose outcome was as thrilling as it. The late afternoon sun bathed the house in a honeyed glow, shadows stretching lazily across the floors. The ordinary rhythm of the household had begun to feel charged. Every moment between us quietly waited with anticipation. The days of subtle glances and fleeting touches had built something unspoken, a hidden thrill that pulsed invisibly through the air. Whenever he was near, as he returned from an errand, I noticed the faint smile tugging at his lips, a subtle acknowledgement that mirrored the fluttering in my chest. There was an ease to his presence now, a quiet confidence that suggested he understood the game we were playing of in. If neither of us spoke of it aloud. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said, his voice steady yet carrying an unspoken warmth. I met his gaze, letting my eyes linger just a fraction longer than necessary, and a small, private smile curved my lips. It was enough a silent confirmation that the tension between us had deepened. I busied myself with arranging flowers in the living room, deliberately placing myself where he would pass. As he handed me a small package, our fingers brushed once more. This time, I allowed the contact to linger slightly longer, subtle but deliberate. A shiver ran through me, a delicious thrill that sent my pulse racing. We moved through the house in quiet, almost ritualistic interactions, a shared glance here, a playful comment there, each gesture calculated yet natural, innocent to any observer, but heavy with unspoken meaning for us. I relished the hidden thrill, the knowledge that our connection was growing stronger, bolder, more daring. When he paused to adjust a painting on the wall, I leaned casually nearby, letting the faintest hint of scent brush his senses, perfume, warmth, presence. He glanced at me, eyes flickering with something unspoken, and I felt a jolt of excitement. We were dancing on the edge of propriety, and every subtle move made the game all the more intoxicating. I found reasons to prolong these encounters, handing him a glass of water, asking for his help with minor tasks, laughing softly at his quiet observations. Each small indulgence was a test of boundaries, a quiet push against the invisible walls of decorum. And each time, I felt the thrill of risk, the secret knowledge that this attraction, this tension, was ours alone. In the quiet moments, I imagined more, the way he might respond if I let a hand linger just a second longer, the look in his eyes if I whispered something playful, the secret thrill of being noticed in ways Michael no longer noticed. The fantasies were small, restrained, tantalizing, but the fire they ignited was real, undeniable. By late afternoon, the hidden thrill had become almost palpable. Every movement, every glance, every fleeting touch carried weight, a quiet power that neither of us could ignore. I felt exhilarated, alive in a way I hadn't in years, and yet tinged with the awareness that this delicate game could not continue indefinitely without consequences. As he prepared to leave for his next task, I found myself stealing one last glance. A momentary pause that held more than mere attention. It was the acknowledgement of desire, of the shared thrill, of the tension that neither of us could fully voice. I whispered softly to myself, "This is dangerous, and yet I cannot resist it." The thrill is everything. The house returned to quiet after he left, yet the invisible charge lingered like the faint echo of a secret laugh, a subtle thrill that would pulse beneath the surface until our next encounter. And I knew, deep inside, that the dance we had begun would grow bolder, more intimate, and increasingly impossible to ignore. The house felt unusually empty that afternoon. Michael had left early for a business trip, his absence leaving a quiet that was both liberating and dangerous. The usual routine seemed suspended, and the stillness made every sound, every movement, every presence more intense, especially his. The driver arrived promptly, as always, but today the energy between us had shifted subtly, charged by the knowledge that Michael would not return for hours. My pulse quickened at the thought. Without the familiar oversight of my husband, the boundaries we had been dancing around felt fragile, bendable, even thrilling. "Good afternoon," I said, meeting his eyes with a warmth I let linger. He returned the greeting with a polite nod, yet there was a flicker in his gaze that hinted he felt the shift to the hidden thrill of possibility now heavier in the air. I found reasons to be near him, walking slowly through the living room as he organized a few things. Our hands brushed once, twice, subtly, deliberately. I let the contact linger just long enough to feel his warmth, to sense the tension in his posture, to delight in the quiet awareness that passed between us. "Do you need any help?" I asked casually, standing close enough that he felt the faint brush of my sleeve against his arm. His eyes flickered to mine for a heartbeat, then returned to the task at hand. But the pause said everything. He was noticing me. He was aware. I moved with calculated grace through the house, finding small indulgences in every interaction, handing him a glass of water, lingering in his presence while he adjusted furniture, laughing softly at a comment that felt just intimate enough to be shared between us alone. Each gesture, each glance, each whisper of sound was a delicate escalation of tension, and I relished every moment. The quiet thrill of forbidden attraction was intoxicating. I imagined what it might feel like if we let our gestures speak louder, if the teasing and subtle flirtation became bolder. The thought sent shivers through me, the tension building like a slow, irresistible storm. At one point, he handed me a small package, and I deliberately let my fingers brush his. Our eyes met for just a moment, and the look we shared was loaded with unspoken meaning. My heartbeat quickened. I realized that the absence of Michael made the energy between us almost unbearable, a delicate thread of anticipation that pulled us closer without a single word. I laughed softly at something he said, letting the sound carry in the quiet house, letting it linger, letting it envelop both of us in the thrill of attention and desire. His glance met mine, brief, restrained, yet unmistakably aware. I felt the magnetic pull stronger than ever, an invisible force that promised danger, excitement, and the thrill of the forbidden. By late afternoon, the tension had escalated to a quiet, pulsing energy. Every movement, every glance, every subtle touch was a test, a tease, a whisper of what could be if we dared cross the line. I leaned against the counter, savoring the thrill, the electricity that hummed between us in the hushed emptiness of the house. I whispered softly to myself, a confession of excitement and caution entwined. This is dangerous and irresistible. Michael is away, and I can feel the temptation building. What happens next? I cannot yet imagine. The house remained calm, yet beneath the surface, the tension was a storm waiting to break. The absence of oversight, the quiet thrill of private moments, and the charged awareness between us had created a space where desire could grow unchecked. And I knew, deep inside, that the coming days would test boundaries further, escalate the temptation, and challenge every ounce of restraint I had left. The quiet of the house carried an unfamiliar weight that afternoon. Michael's absence created an invisible space, one that seemed to hum with possibility. Every step I took, every glance I gave, felt magnified, alive with tension. And there he was, moving through the house with calm efficiency, unaware or perhaps very aware of the invisible thread connecting us. I decided it was time to test the waters further, to let our unspoken game move into bolder territory. I found him arranging papers in the living room and lingered nearby, pretending to adjust a vase while deliberately keeping my presence close. Each of our glances met with subtle recognition, a silent acknowledgement that our interactions were no longer merely casual. "Could you help me with this?" I asked, my voice soft but carrying a warmth meant only for him. I handed him a stack of folders, letting my fingers brush his hand lightly, deliberately. The contact was brief, yet the reaction in his eyes momentary. Almost imperceptible, told me everything I needed to know. He noticed. As he worked, I found reasons to remain in close proximity, leaning slightly against the counter, casually walking by him, letting my gaze meet his more deliberately. Each subtle gesture, each moment of intentional closeness increased the tension in the air, the invisible charge between us almost tangible. I laughed softly at a comment he made, letting my voice linger just long enough to draw his attention fully. He looked up, eyes meeting mine, and the flicker of something unspoken passed between us, a recognition of mutual awareness, a silent thrill, a shared excitement. The danger of crossing boundaries made every second more intoxicating. In the kitchen, I asked for his help with a minor task, deliberately positioning myself close enough that the faintest touch could occur naturally. As our hands met while reaching for the same object, I allowed the contact to linger slightly longer than necessary, feeling the warmth of his skin, the subtle energy flowing between us. The air seemed charged, every moment stretching with anticipation. The subtle flirtations we had been cultivating over days had now escalated into daring gestures. Each interaction loaded with more tension, more awareness, more unspoken promise. I could feel the pull of attraction in every glance, every movement, every small indulgence. I realized that with Michael away, the dynamic between us had shifted. I had room to explore this forbidden game, to test boundaries, to experience the thrill of attention, desire, and intimate tension without the constant reminder of marital propriety. The excitement was overwhelming, but I allowed myself to savor it, each moment a private indulgence. As the afternoon wore on, our encounters grew bolder. I let my gaze linger longer, my movements more deliberate, my words softer, closer, intimate in their subtlety. Each brush of our fingers, each shared glance, each quiet smile was a silent negotiation of attraction, a delicate dance that neither of us wanted to end. By evening, I found myself leaning against the counter, heart racing, thoughts spinning. The first bold move had been made, and the invisible thread of tension had strengthened into something undeniable. The thrill of danger, of forbidden desire, of private moments charged with electricity, filled me completely. I whispered softly to myself, a mixture of caution and excitement. This is only the beginning, and I can already feel how far we might go. The house remained calm, unaware of the storm quietly building in its walls. And in that quiet, charged space, I knew that the game we had begun was no longer just playful, it was real, intense, and dangerously irresistible. The afternoon light slanted softly through the windows, casting a warm glow over the quiet house. Every ordinary sound seemed heightened. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards, the faint rustle of papers on the desk. And amidst this calm, the tension between us pulsed quietly, waiting for the right moment to ignite. He entered the room carrying a small tray of refreshments, and as our eyes met, I felt the familiar flutter in my chest. Today, the energy between us felt heavier, charged with anticipation. It was no longer just fleeting glances or accidental touches. There was a deliberate intimacy building, subtle yet unmistakable. "Here," he said, offering me a glass of juice. Our fingers brushed lightly, deliberately, and I let the contact linger. feeling the warmth and subtle strength in his hand. The brief touch sent a shiver down my spine, a delicious spark that neither of us could ignore. I held his gaze longer than necessary, letting a faint, knowing smile curve my lips. He responded with a subtle lift of his eyebrow, a quiet acknowledgement of the unspoken understanding between us. Every lingering glance was a conversation without words, each look a thread weaving tension and desire into the space around us. As he set the tray down, I found myself unconsciously stepping closer, letting my shoulder brush against his. The proximity was small, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but to us, it carried the weight of shared awareness of the game that had grown bolder with each passing day. I laughed softly at a comment he made, the sound carrying just long enough to draw his full attention. His eyes met mine again, and the fleeting spark between us deepened. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, allowing us these private moments charged with silent desire. I moved about the room with deliberate care, positioning myself near him under the guise of tidying up, each step a subtle test of boundaries. The lingering glances, the quiet smiles, the accidental touches all became part of a delicate dance, a flirtation that neither of us dared to speak aloud, but both of us understood perfectly. When our hands brushed again while reaching for a document, I let my fingers linger just a second longer, feeling the heat of connection and anticipation. He responded with nothing overt, yet the slight pause, the quiet catch in his breath, told me he felt it just as intensely as I did. The thrill of these secret interactions was intoxicating. I found myself imagining what might happen if we allowed the gestures to grow bolder, if the flirting became more daring, if the tension were no longer restrained by caution. The thought sent a rush of excitement through me, an almost forbidden pleasure that I could not suppress. As the sun dipped lower, casting longer shadows across the floor, I leaned against the counter, heart racing, savoring the lingering thrill of our connection. The tension between us was now undeniable, a quiet, simmering heat that promised more, much more. In the days to come, I whispered softly to myself, a mixture of anticipation and caution, the glances, the touches. The moments alone, they are dangerous, yet irresistible. The thrill is mine, and yet, I wonder how far it can go. The house remained quiet, unaware of the storm quietly building within its walls. And in that stillness, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The flirtation had deepened, the desire had grown, and the hidden, lingering glances were only the beginning of a story that would become more daring, more intimate, and increasingly impossible to resist. The house hummed with a quiet stillness that afternoon, the kind of calm that felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something unseen to stir. And stir it did, for the tension between us had grown into an unspoken presence, a current that ran silently through every room, every glance, every small interaction. When he entered carrying a stack of books, I felt my pulse quicken in anticipation. His gaze met mine briefly, a flicker of something unspoken passing between us. Something electric and private. I allowed my smile to linger, subtle but intentional, a secret invitation only he could understand. Here, these belong in the study, he said, handing me the books. Our fingers brushed, deliberately subtle, and I let my touch linger just a heartbeat longer than necessary. That brief contact sent a shiver through me, a rush of thrill that both alarmed and delighted me. As he moved about the room, I found myself lingering nearby, pretending to organize papers, but really ensuring our paths crossed. Each glance, each quiet smile, each subtle movement was a part of the game we were playing, a dance that grew bolder with each passing day. I laughed softly at something he said, letting my voice carry in the quiet room. Our eyes met, and the intensity of the shared acknowledgement was undeniable. The flirtation was no longer hidden, it existed in these secret smiles, these fleeting moments of awareness that neither of us dared voice aloud, but both felt deeply. I deliberately positioned myself near him under the guise of reaching for a pen, letting our hands brush again. This time, the contact was more intentional, a silent message in the heat and warmth that passed between us. His subtle pause, the slight catch in his breath, spoke volumes more than words ever could. The thrill of secrecy, of hidden smiles and subtle touches, was intoxicating. I imagined what it might feel like if we allowed these moments to grow bolder, if the flirtation became more daring, if the tension were no longer restrained by polite decorum. The very thought sent a rush of excitement through me, a delicious anticipation of what could come. During a brief pause, I let my gaze linger on him, letting the warmth of my expression convey what I could not speak aloud. He met my eyes, a quiet understanding reflected in his, a recognition of the invisible thread connecting us. Each smile, each glance, each fleeting touch became a private conversation, a story written in silence, charged with desire. As the afternoon wore on, the secret smiles multiplied, each one a test, a tease, a private acknowledgement of mutual attraction. I felt the heat of tension in the air, a quiet fire that promised more daring interactions, more intimate moments, more of the forbidden thrill that had been building since the first day of subtle glances. By the time he left to continue his duties, I leaned against the counter, heart racing, savoring the quiet victory of our interactions. The secret smiles, the lingering touches, the shared glances, they had become a language of their own, a language charged with intimacy, anticipation, and the delicious thrill of forbidden desire. I whispered softly to myself, a mixture of excitement and caution. Each smile, each glance, each touch, it's a step deeper into temptation, and yet I cannot resist it. The house returned to quiet, but the invisible tension lingered like a current beneath the surface, promising that the next encounter would be bolder, more daring, and even harder to resist. The evening air was warm, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the living room. The house felt unusually quiet, Michael still away on his business trip, leaving the space open and alive with a dangerous, unspoken energy. I moved deliberately, aware of every step, every sound, every small detail, especially the presence of him, the driver, who moved through the room with calm efficiency. Unaware or perhaps knowingly complicit in the tension between us, I found an excuse to call him to the study under the pretense of needing help with some paperwork. As he approached, I made sure to arrange myself in a way that brought us physically closer than usual. Our eyes met, lingering just a fraction too long, and I felt the familiar flutter of anticipation. "Could you help me with this?" I asked softly, gesturing toward a stack of papers. His response was calm, professional, but I noticed the subtle shift in his posture, the slight lift of an eyebrow, the unspoken awareness of what was happening. As he leaned over to organize the papers, I allowed my hand to brush against his, deliberate yet natural. The contact was fleeting but charged, a silent acknowledgement of the electricity between us. I felt a shiver of excitement, the thrill of stepping further into the forbidden, and the quiet danger of being caught only heightened it. I deliberately arranged the papers in a way that forced us to work side by side, close enough for the warmth of his presence to brush against me. Every subtle touch, every shared glance, every near casual laugh was now layered with a tension that neither of us could ignore. The private moment was no longer just a fleeting interaction, it was an unspoken permission to explore the thrill we had cultivated over days. I let my gaze drift to his hands as they moved over the papers, imagining the warmth of contact lingering longer than it should. When our eyes met again, I held his gaze just a moment longer, letting the weight of desire pass silently between us. The air was heavy with anticipation, charged with a thrill neither of us would voice aloud, yet impossible to ignore. "Do you need me to adjust anything else?" he asked, his voice steady but softer than usual. I smiled, letting the subtle curve of my lips convey more than words could. "No." That's perfect, I said, letting my tone carry a quiet intimacy meant only for him. The private moment stretched on, each gesture deliberate, each glance meaningful. I leaned slightly closer under the pretense of reviewing a document, feeling the heat of proximity, the pulse of unspoken tension. The thrill of risk was intoxicating, a heady mix of excitement, anticipation, and desire. I imagined what it would feel like if we allowed the touches to become bolder, the flirtation more daring, the interaction less restrained. My pulse quickened at the thought, the delicious tension now a tangible presence in the quiet study. As he straightened the last of the papers, I lingered near him, our shoulders almost brushing, our eyes locked in a silent, charged conversation. I whispered softly to myself, a confession to the quiet room, this private moment. It's a taste of what's to come, and I cannot wait to see how far it will go. The house remained calm, the rest of the world oblivious to the invisible tension swirling in the study. But in that private moment, the quiet intimacy, the subtle touches, and the charged glances marked a turning point, a step deeper into desire, into temptation, and into the thrilling, dangerous dance that had only just begun. The evening had settled into a quiet hush, the golden light fading into dusky shadows. The house, usually filled with the mundane rhythms of daily life, now carried a charged energy that made each sound, each movement, each glance between us feel heightened. The absence of Michael had stretched time into something fluid, and every encounter felt more intense, more intimate. He was arranging some papers near the window when I approached, my steps deliberate yet casual. Our eyes met, and I felt that familiar flutter of anticipation. The air between us was thick with tension, yet unspoken desires hovered just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to ignite. "Do you need a hand with this?" I asked softly, though I already knew the answer. My words carried warmth, subtle and personal, meant only for him. He glanced at me, eyes flickering with something deeper than mere acknowledgement or recognition of the unspoken, a shared thrill that neither of us could voice. As I reached to point at a document, our fingers brushed again, deliberately lingering just slightly longer than necessary. The contact was fleeting yet electric, a spark that traveled silently between us. His eyes met mine, and in that gaze was an understanding, a silent promise, a wordless acknowledgement of what had been building over days of subtle flirtation and small indulgences. I allowed myself to step a fraction closer under the pretense of reading the paper, feeling the warmth of proximity, the thrill of the forbidden. The room seemed to shrink around us, every glance, every movement magnified by the quiet tension. Each brush of our hands, each shared look, each subtle smile had become a private language, a story written in silence. The temptation was intoxicating. I imagined what it might feel like if our touches grew bolder, if the playful glances turned into something more daring, more intimate. The mere thought sent shivers through me, a delicious, almost dangerous thrill. "Do you want me to adjust this?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying a softness I had not noticed before. I nodded slightly, letting my hand hover near his, the faintest brush sending sparks through the charged air. The silence between us was no longer empty, it was thick with unspoken desire, a tension that neither of us could ignore. I found my gaze drawn to him again and allowed a small, private smile to curl my lips, a subtle invitation only he could understand. He returned it with a quiet acknowledgement, a flicker of heat in his eyes, and the invisible thread between us pulled taut, stronger, more intense, impossible to resist. The unspoken desires were now impossible to dismiss. Every glance, every brush of a hand, every soft word had become a dance on the edge of propriety, a delicate balance between temptation and restraint. I could feel the magnetic pull between us growing stronger, drawing us into a realm where the ordinary rules no longer applied. I whispered softly to myself, almost reverently, the thrill of anticipation coursing through me. Every touch, every glance, it's pulling us closer. And I can feel how far we might go. As the shadows deepened and the evening grew quieter, I realized that this unspoken tension had become the most alive I had ever felt. The private, forbidden connection had turned into a force I could neither resist nor fully understand. A thrilling, dangerous, intoxicating pull that promised more, much more, in the days to come. The night had settled over the house, casting shadows that danced softly along the walls. The usual hum of evening life had quieted, leaving an almost electric stillness in its place. Every step, every breath, every movement carried weight, charged with the tension that had been building between us over days of stolen glances and subtle touches. He entered the room, carrying a small stack of documents, and our eyes met immediately. The glance was more than casual, it was loaded with an unspoken understanding. The air between us was heavy, taut, alive with desire and anticipation. I felt the familiar flutter in my chest, the pulse of something thrilling, dangerous, and irresistible. "Do you need any help?" I asked softly, stepping closer than usual under the pretense of reading a note on one of the papers. The faint brush of his shoulder against mine was deliberate, or perhaps instinctual, and the spark it ignited ran through me like electricity. He straightened the papers, and I allowed my hand to linger near his, letting the proximity speak more than words ever could. Our shared glances grew longer, more intimate, carrying with them the weight of desire and the thrill of secrecy. Each subtle gesture had evolved into a private language, one that neither of us dared speak aloud, yet both understood perfectly. I stepped slightly closer, letting the warmth of my presence brush against him. He responded without moving away, an acknowledgement that the tension was mutual, a silent confirmation that we were both aware of the invisible thread connecting us. The thrill of the forbidden surged through me, intoxicating and impossible to ignore. "Everything in order?" I asked, my voice lowering just slightly, carrying an intimacy that made him pause. His eyes flickered with recognition, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corner of his lips. The moment was fragile, delicate, yet heavy with anticipation. I deliberately moved so that our hands met while adjusting the papers together. The contact was intentional, lingering. A small but daring step beyond the teasing interactions of the past days. The heat of proximity, the pulse of unspoken desire, filled the quiet room, wrapping around us like an invisible current. We exchanged glances, eyes locking for a fraction longer than propriety allowed. The unspoken tension pulsed between us, a rhythm that neither dared interrupt. I felt my heartbeat accelerate, a mixture of thrill, fear, and desire swirling together in a dangerous, irresistible cocktail. The quiet house seemed to amplify every sensation: the brush of skin, the shared breath, the subtle shifts in posture. It was a delicate, private dance, one where words were unnecessary, where every glance, every touch, every lingering moment conveyed far more than any sentence could. I allowed a small, teasing smile to play at my lips, letting it linger. A subtle invitation he understood. He responded with nothing overt, yet the slight lift of his eyebrow, the almost imperceptible shift in stance, spoke volumes. The air between us was charged, a storm building in slow, thrilling increments. As I straightened a final document, I leaned just a little closer, heart racing with the thrill of danger and excitement. The close encounter, the proximity, the lingering touches, the silent acknowledgments marked a turning point. What had begun as playful flirtation had now escalated into a private, daring intimacy that neither of us could ignore. I whispered softly to myself, the confession trembling on my lips. This is dangerously close, yet I cannot resist it. Every moment pulls us deeper into temptation, and I am powerless to stop it. The night outside remained calm, unaware of the storm quietly building within the walls. Inside, the tension had escalated into something undeniable, intoxicating, and thrilling a promise of moments to come that would be bolder, more intimate, and impossible to resist. The house was cloaked in silence that night, each shadow stretching across familiar rooms like a prelude to something electric. The absence of Michael had created a rare, unspoken freedom, a dangerous space where desire and anticipation could flourish unchecked. Every corner, every surface, every quiet movement seemed to vibrate with the tension between us. He was in the study, organizing papers, and I entered under the pretense of retrieving a notebook. The simple act of passing by him carried weight, each step deliberate, each glance charged. Our eyes met, and the spark that had been simmering for days flared with intensity. The air seemed to hum with anticipation, a private electricity that no one else could perceive. I lingered by the desk, pretending to check a note, but the proximity was intentional. Every brush of our hands, every subtle shift in posture was magnified in significance. The flirtation we had cultivated over days had evolved into something daring, a game of tension that neither of us could deny. "Do you want me to help with this?" I asked softly, stepping closer under the guise of reaching for a pen. My voice carried an intimacy that was meant only for him. He looked up, eyes locking with mine, and the slight lift of his eyebrow, the faintest curve of his lips, spoke volumes. He felt it too, the thrill, the pull, the dangerous allure of the forbidden. We worked side by side, the space between us charged, every glance a silent dialogue of desire and restraint. I allowed my hand to linger near his as we reached for the same papers, our fingers brushing deliberately. The subtle touch sent a shiver through me, a mixture of excitement and fear, the perfect blend of temptation and caution. The tension had reached its peak, each unspoken moment amplified by the quiet of the house. I could feel it in the way he moved, in the way his gaze lingered, in the almost imperceptible shift of his stance. It was a dance of desire, a delicate balance of attraction and restraint, each second heavy with possibility. I let my smile play a little longer, teasing, knowing, charged with intention. He responded with the faintest acknowledgement, a quiet spark that mirrored the storm building within me. Every glance, every touch, every shared silence was a testament to the intensity of our connection. As the evening deepened, I found myself leaning slightly closer, our shoulders brushing, our shared space shrinking into an intimate bubble. The thrill of proximity, the heady rush of attraction, and the danger of discovery all combined into a powerful, almost overwhelming energy. The peak of tension was intoxicating. I imagined what could happen if we allowed ourselves to cross the final, invisible line. If the flirtation became more daring, more intimate, more real. The thought sent a pulse of excitement through me, a delicious ache of anticipation that made every heartbeat feel amplified. I whispered softly to myself, a confession to the quiet room. This is the climax of temptation. Every glance, every brush of a hand, it's pulling us to the edge, and I can feel how irresistible it has become. The house remained unaware of the storm within, yet inside, the energy had reached its zenith. The subtle gestures, the lingering touches, the shared glances all had built toward this moment of peak tension. And I knew that the final chapter would demand resolution, a decision, a moment that could not be ignored. The night was silent, the shadows long, and the tension between us was undeniable, ready to tip into something irreversible, thrilling, and unforgettable. The morning sunlight poured gently into the house, but the calm it brought felt fragile, like the quiet before a storm. The tension that had simmered for days, weeks even, had reached its breaking point. Every glance, every touch, every secret smile now demanded reckoning. The invisible thread between us had tightened to an almost unbearable tension, and there was no turning back. He was in the kitchen, quietly preparing a cup of coffee, and I approached, my steps measured, heart racing. Our eyes met, and the unspoken intensity hung thick in the air, heavier than ever before. The thrill, the temptation, the forbidden allure, it all converged into a moment that demanded honesty, clarity, and consequence. Before Michael returns, I began softly, voice steady despite the whirlwind inside me. We need to talk about us and what's been happening. His eyes widened, and for a heartbeat, the usual calm he carried wavered. There was no need for words. He understood that the flirtation, the secret touches, the stolen moments had escalated beyond playful teasing. The tension between us was no longer a game. It was real, and it demanded acknowledgement. I took a deep breath and stepped closer, the air thick with anticipation. I can't ignore what's happening, I said, letting the confession hang in the quiet room. I feel it, and I know you do too. He nodded slowly, a quiet acknowledgement, but his expression carried the weight of restraint, of awareness that this moment was dangerous. The house was still, the world outside oblivious, yet within these walls, a storm had been brewing, a storm of desire, temptation, and forbidden connection. I've tried to resist, I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. But the attraction, the tension between us, it's impossible to deny. He remained silent, eyes searching mine, reading the unspoken, understanding the gravity of the situation. The subtle flirtations, the lingering touches, the shared glances, all had led to this moment. And now, the consequences were unavoidable. I stepped even closer, our shoulders brushing, the proximity electric. I can't continue this without you knowing how real it is. How much it's grown, I confessed. His gaze softened, a flicker of desire mingled with caution. There was no need for further words. The quiet intensity of the moment, the weight of unspoken desires, and the culmination of tension over days and weeks spoke louder than any sentence could. The attraction was undeniable. The thrill of forbidden desire had reached its peak, and there was no way to retreat. I paused, heart racing, and whispered, "Whatever happens, I needed you to know." The acknowledgement in his eyes mirrored my own quiet understanding that what we had shared in secret was real, dangerous, and irreversible. And yet, the moment was fleeting, fragile, a delicate balance between temptation and consequence. As Michael's return loomed on the horizon, the house remained calm, unaware of the storm that had quietly unfolded behind closed doors. But within those walls, the connection had evolved, escalated, and reached its zenith. The flirting, the secret touches, the hidden smiles, all had led to this ultimate moment of reckoning. I stepped back slightly, allowing the space to breathe, letting the tension linger in the air. Heavy, electric, unbroken. The morning sun cast long shadows across the floor, and for a brief moment, the world outside seemed distant, irrelevant. I whispered softly, a private acknowledgement of what had transpired, the tension, the thrill, the forbidden. It's real, and now it will never be the same again. The story had reached its conclusion not in resolution or forgiveness, but in acknowledgement, in recognition of desire, and in the quiet, charged aftermath of temptation fulfilled and boundaries tested. The house remained silent, the storm having passed for now, leaving behind only the lingering echoes of passion, anticipation, and the irreversible changes that had taken place within its walls.